Imagine trying to measure the exact weight of a human soul, but you're using like a kitchen scale.
A kitchen scale.
Yeah, a basic kitchen scale. It's an absurd mental image, right? You just have the completely wrong tool for the reality you're trying to grasp. I mean, you could place a person on the scale, look at the numbers, and think you've gathered some, meaningful data, but you've missed the immaterial reality completely.
Yeah, you're measuring the wrong thing entirely.
Right. So, welcome to Reform Thinking. Today, we are taking a deep dive into a historical text that argues our human logic is, well, it's quite a bit like that kitchen scale when it comes to understanding the creator of the universe. Because, when we talk about measuring an historical event, we usually expect this sort of engineering level precision.
Sure, we want the hard data.
Yeah. Like you look at a massive bridge being built in the 19th century, and you calculate the stone used, the labor, the timeline, and the historian just points and says, there it is, cause and effect.
And it's comforting for us to view the world that way. We really like things to be visible, to be categorized. We want to wrap our minds around the literal mechanics of how a thing happened. You have the blueprints, you have the materials, and boom, you get the result.
Cause and effect.
Yeah.
Broken or not broken, it's clean. But then you step into the world of 17th century theology, specifically looking at the incarnation of the creator, and suddenly that measuring tape it snaps in half.
It really does.
We're looking at a theological landscape that is completely murky to the human mind. Our standard tools for measuring reality fail us, and they fail spectacularly. So I'll be your host for this conversation, and sitting across from me is our resident theology expert. Today, our focus is on extracting key insights from the writings of John Owen. Specifically, we're analyzing a dense, fascinating text about Christ's assumption of the office of mediator and focusing on his extraordinary condescension.
And I'm thrilled to be here to work through this with you. John Owen is, he's not an author you just skim while drinking your morning coffee.
Definitely not.
No, he writes with the surgical precision that demands your absolute full attention. Our goal with this material is to understand the sheer scale of the infinite creator literally stepping into human history.
And we want to clear up centuries of misunderstandings about how this actually happened and uncover the practical implications for your daily faith. Because if you're listening to this, the objective here is not to solve a math equation. We are here to gaze upon a mystery that defies human reason.
Right. So in our discussion today, we're going to look first at the absolute necessity of a mediator. From there, we need to define what this concept of self-emptying entails. And we'll spend a significant amount of time defending what it is not.
Which is huge.
It is, because people have tried to force this mystery into logical boxes for centuries, and Owen just dismantles those boxes one by one. And then finally, we'll close with the life-altering reality of finding a sanctuary in this truth.
Man, I am ready to get into it. Let's start with the fundamental problem presented in the source. There is this vast, unbridgeable distance between the creator and humanity. And it's not just a distance of space, like, between here and the Andromeda galaxy.
Right. It's not physical distance.
No, it's a distance of nature, and it's exacerbated by human apostasy. And apostasy is a heavy word, but here it means a literal, legal, and moral rebellion.
A total severance.
Yeah. So imagine two warring nations separated by an ocean. They possess no shared language, they have no shared culture, and they share an intense mutual hostility.
A total standoff.
Right. Who negotiates the peace in that scenario? You can't just yell across the water. The text points to the book of Job, where Job cries out by the desperate need for a daysman.
The term daysman is fascinating. It's an older legal term for an umpire or an arbitrator, someone who can literally lay a hand on both parties.
Lay a hand on both parties. I like that.
Yeah, if you have two groups who refuse to even be in the same room, you need an arbitrator who possesses standing with both sides, someone who is trusted by the king of the first nation, but who also intimately understands the plight of the second nation.
Someone who can bridge the gap. But this brings up a massive question for me. Why couldn't the creator just declare peace unilaterally? Like, if he has all authority, why the absolute necessity of this daysman? Why couldn't he just wave a hand and say, we're good, the war is over?
Well, Owen makes a brilliant theological argument right here based on the nature of mediation itself, and he draws from the book of Galatians. God, considered absolutely in his divine essence, could not act as a mediator in the strictest sense of the word.
Wait, really? Why not?
Because a mediator, by definition, must represent two distinct parties. A mediator is not of one, but God is one.
Okay, let me make sure I'm following the logic. Because the creator is one party in the dispute, he can't mediate his own dispute.
That is the core of it. Whatever the Creator might do in a way of sovereign grace, he couldn't do it in the way of mediation without a distinct office. The justice required by the rebellion of humanity demanded a righteous peace. And establishing that righteous peace required a mediator to step into the gap, representing both the offended creator and the offending creature.
Okay, so a mediator is structurally required. You have to have a third party. But why couldn't we just, I don't know, recruit a really good human? Or an angel? The text makes it clear that no created being could do this job. If we just need an arbitrator, why not pick the highest archangel?
This comes down to the concept of self-sufficiency. Owen points out that all creatures, whether it's an archangel in heaven or the most moral human on earth, they depend entirely on their creator for their own blessedness.
Right.
If you are a creature, you are inherently finite. You are not self-sufficient. You draw your very existence from outside of yourself.
You're a dependent variable.
Yes, well, precisely. And because you are a dependent, finite creature, you lack the infinite capacity required to negotiate a righteous peace between finite, apostate humanity and an infinite creator.
Ah.
Because the offense against an infinite being carries infinite weight. An angel, being finite, would just be crushed under the weight of that negotiation. If an angel tries to bridge an infinite chasm, they fall short. It's mathematically impossible for the finite to span the infinite.
Man, so no creature can do it. The task absolutely required the Son of God to take on a completely new nature. He had to become the daysman. But this brings up a huge tension for me, and I want to push back gently on the concept of the Creator caring for humanity at all.
Okay, go for it.
If the Creator is entirely self-sufficient, right, requiring absolutely nothing for his own eternal satisfaction, why does he care about us? The text uses some pretty stark imagery, describing all nations as the drop of a bucket and the small dust of the balance.
Yeah, from Isaiah.
Yeah. So if we're just the dust on the scales, why bother with the dust?
This touches on the absolute mystery of the divine will. Owen uses 3 specific terms to describe the magnitude of what the Creator did. The first is kenosis, a Greek word that means self-emptying.
Kenosis.
The second is a Latin-derived word, exinanition, which describes an emptied or exhausted condition. And the third is subkatabasis, another Greek term the ancient church used, meaning to go down from a higher place to a lower place.
Subkatabasis. I'm guessing that's not just, walking down a flight of stairs. What does stepping down actually look like for an infinite being?
To understand the scale of the subkatabasis, you have to understand his complete self-sufficiency. We call this aseity, the concept that God derives his existence completely from himself.
Aseity.
Yeah. The entire creation combined, every star, every galaxy, every angel, every human, cannot add a single mite to his satisfaction. He lacks nothing. If the universe disappeared tomorrow, he wouldn't be diminished by a fraction of a percent.
That is a staggering thought. Because we usually think of relationships in terms of mutual benefit. I bring something to the table, you bring something to the table. But here, we bring literally nothing.
Right. And you hit the core issue there, because he needs nothing. Even a passing glance at the most glorious angels in heaven is an act of extreme self-humbling. It's the subkatabasis. He's stepping down from infinite majesty just to acknowledge the existence of an archangel.
Wow. If acknowledging an archangel is a massive step down, then for him to take on human nature, I'm trying to find a good analogy. Think about a billionaire CEO leaving the boardroom to go sweep the factory floor. We would call that a humble act. But Owen is suggesting the gap is much larger. It's more like a human voluntarily choosing to become a microscopic amoeba to save a puddle of water.
Yeah.
The scale of that condescension is shocking.
The human-to-amoeba analogy starts to get at the scale, but honestly, even that falls short because a human and an amoeba are both finite creatures.
Ouch.
The gap between the infinite creator and finite dust is unquantifiable. And Owen highlights a crucial element here: the voluntary nature of Christ's act.
Right, he wasn't forced into it.
No. This wasn't imposed on him by lot, by chance, or by any necessity of nature. He didn't stand in need of this office. It was a completely free act of grace. He graciously condescended to assume this office of his own accord. That voluntary nature makes the self-emptying infinitely more glorious. He chose the dust.
Wow. And here's where the text gets incredibly layered. Because to understand this mystery, Owen spends a massive amount of time explaining what did not happen. He defines the truth by denying the historical misunderstandings that have plagued the church for centuries.
Which is so helpful because it makes sense that human reason would try to simplify this puzzle. When faced with an infinite gap, our logic tries to build a recognizable bridge.
Totally. Let me run a logical attempt by you. Say I'm wearing a very heavy, elaborate winter coat. If I take off that coat, I am still myself. I've simply changed my outward state. I'm just a guy without a coat now. Did the Son of God just take off his deity like a heavy coat to become human?
That is precisely the kind of logical trap human reason falls into. We want to say he dropped the God part to become the man part. Owen systematically dismantles these logical shortcuts. He tackles 4 specific historical errors that try to explain away the mystery. Let's look at the first one, the Socinian error.
I'm not super familiar with that term. What does a Socinian believe?
So the text brings up this 16th century idea, which claims that Christ was simply a man who was made into a god. They believe he was miraculously born, lived a good life, and performed miracles, but he was strictly human.
Okay.
In their view, the title of God was basically an honorary promotion given to him after the fact because he was so righteous.
Wait, so the Socinian idea is basically saying he was just a really good guy who earned a divine promotion. It's a meritocracy.
That's a spot-on way to summarize it. It turns the incarnation into a meritocracy. And Owen destroys this by pointing out the devastating mechanical flaw in that logic. This view completely strips the entire action of its grace.
How so?
Think about the mechanics of grace. Grace involves stepping down to lift someone else up. If Christ was only a man who got promoted to divine status, he did it for his own sake. He acted to improve his own condition. There's no condescension there. There's no kenosis. It's just a man climbing the corporate ladder of the universe.
I see the problem. If he's climbing the ladder, he's not a savior reaching down to the dust. He's just the most successful piece of dust.
Yeah.
It completely ruins the entire concept of a rescue mission. He didn't step down, he stepped up.
And if he only stepped up, you have no daysman. You have no one laying a hand on both parties out of sheer grace. You just have a success story.
That makes total sense. We can cross the Socinian promotion off the list. What is the second logical trap Owen attacks?
The second is the Arian error, which Owen also compares to the doctrine of transubstantiation. This is the idea that the divine essence was literally turned into flesh.
Like a magic trick.
Yeah, think of the miracle where water was turned into wine. The water ceased to be water, its substance was completely converted into wine. This error suggests the divine nature was converted into human nature.
Okay, so the coat wasn't taken off. The coat literally morphed into a different material. Why is Owen so opposed to this idea?
Owen has a very strong reaction to this. He calls this view Ichabod, which is a Hebrew term meaning the glory has departed. He argues this idea has no glory in it whatsoever because it destroys both natures entirely.
Walk me through the destruction of both natures. How does conversion destroy them?
If the divine essence is changed into flesh, it ceases to be divine. God ceases to be God. That violates the fundamental immutability of the Creator. God cannot change his core essence. So, boom, you lose the divine party.
Right. And what about the human nature? If he turned into a human, do we not at least have a human representative?
No, and this is the brilliant part of Owen's argument. The resulting human nature has no real kindred or alliance to our human nature because it was made out of the substance of the divine word, not derived from a human lineage. It's a completely alien substance. You're left with a third thing that is neither truly God nor truly man.
Wow. You lose the daysman again, because the daysman has to be fully God to represent the Creator and fully man derived from our actual lineage to represent us. If he's just a converted third substance, he has standing with nobody.
That nails it. You lose the mediator entirely.
Okay, we've ruled out the promotion theory and we've ruled out the conversion theory. What is the third error?
The Eutychian error. This comes from a thinker in the 5th century. His idea was that the two natures of Christ, the divine and the human, were mixed or compounded together into one new blended nature.
Like blending blue paint and yellow paint to get green paint. The blue and yellow are both in there, but now you just have a bucket of green.
That's a great visual. And Owen rebuts this by looking again at the immutable nature of the Creator. The divine essence has, as the text says, no variableness nor shadow of turning. It cannot be mixed, diluted, or altered. It remained the exact same in him in all its essential properties from eternity past.
So if you mix blue and yellow to get green, the green can't relate perfectly to pure blue or pure yellow. The daysman is compromised.
Furthermore, mixing the natures would mean the divine nature suffered a change. And the divine nature suffered nothing in itself. It cannot be acted upon or altered by the physical world. Making a blended nature means altering the divine essence, making it something it was not.
The logic is rigorous. Every time human reason tries to make it mathematically clean, by promoting, converting, or mixing, we end up destroying the very mechanism that makes salvation possible.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
What's the fourth and final error Owen addresses?
The fourth is the Docetist error. This is often called the first major heresy in church history. The Docetists operated on a Greek philosophical assumption that all physical matter was inherently evil or corrupt. So, they reasoned, the pure Son of God couldn't possibly take on a real, physical, biological body.
They thought a physical body was beneath him.
Yes. Therefore, they argued, his human body was just a phantasm, an illusion. It was an appearance, much like an angel appearing in the shape of a man in the Old Testament accounts.
So he only appeared to eat, drink, and suffer. It was like a hologram.
A physical hologram, yes. And Owen points out the catastrophic consequence of this view. The ancient Christians told the Docetists, if you feign an imaginary physical body, you're left with an imaginary crucifixion.
Man, that is a chilling phrase, an imaginary crucifixion.
It gets worse. If you have an imaginary crucifixion where no real blood is shed and no real physical death occurs, you have an imaginary salvation.
That hits hard. If he didn't genuinely assume our actual physical nature, he couldn't pay the actual physical price for our actual apostasy. A hologram can't die. A hologram can't be a substitute for a human being.
The debt was real, the rebellion was real, so the daysmen had to be incredibly physically real.
Let's pause and consolidate where we are. The text is guarding the mystery by putting up fences. The Son of God didn't climb a ladder to earn deity. His divine nature didn't morph or convert into flesh. He didn't mix the two natures into a third, green paint substance. And his physical body was definitely not a hologram. We have denied all the ways human logic tries to simplify the incarnation. So what is the positive reality? What actually happened according to John Owen's text?
The text lays out the true mechanics of this condescension in three distinct components. It's crucial to understand these three pillars. The first component is the assumption of human nature into an individual subsistence.
Assumption of human nature into an individual subsistence. That is a dense phrase. Walk me through what that means.
Owen uses the analogy of Adam to explain this. When Adam was first created, human nature existed in him alone. The entirety of what it meant to be human was wrapped up in one person. But he was a specific, individual man. Every person listening to us right now possesses human nature, but that nature is appropriated to you by your individual subsistence. You are a specific person, not just a generic concept of a human floating in the ether.
I have my own thoughts, my own body, my own specific existence.
In the same way, the eternal person of the Son of God took that human nature, which is common to all of us, into a peculiar subsistence in his own divine person. He didn't just inhabit a man who already existed, like a spirit possessing a host. He took the nature itself and made it uniquely his own. He became the specific man, Christ Jesus.
So the divine person assumed a human nature, creating one person with two distinct natures.
Yes. Whatever was done in that human nature was done by the person of the Son of God. The natures remain distinct, but they are united in one single individual.
That leads right into the second component, which is fascinating when you think about the daily reality of his life. The second component is the veiling of his glory. The text points out that he made himself of no reputation. He hid his infinite majesty so thoroughly that the world didn't even regard him as a good man.
The effectiveness of that veil is staggering.
Think about the scene in the Gospel of John, chapter 8. Jesus is debating with the religious leaders, and he tells them, before Abraham was, I am. He uses the divine name. He explicitly claims to be the eternal creator.
And the immediate reaction of the crowd wasn't worship. It was to pick up stones to execute him.
Right. And they explicitly state their reason later. Because you, being a man, make yourself God. It shows how utterly normal and physically ordinary he appeared to the naked eye. If he was glowing or floating slightly off the ground or projecting a visible aura of infinite majesty, the crowd would have fallen on their faces in terror.
Oh, without a doubt.
But they looked at him and saw a completely ordinary blue-collar construction worker from Nazareth. His glory was veiled so completely that their human reason couldn't compute the idea that he was the infinite creator.
This is the massive stumbling block for human reason. The world couldn't bear the intimation of his divine nature because they supposed themselves secure in what they saw with their own two eyes. They trusted their kitchen scale. They looked at the scale, saw an ordinary man, and thought it was absolute madness for a sober man to claim to be God.
The veil was flawless.
Yeah.
And what is the third component of the true mechanics?
The third is the preservation of the human nature in its entirety. When he assumed our nature, he didn't change it into something purely spiritual or divine. He didn't upgrade the human nature so that it was immune to pain. He preserved it entirely in all its essential properties.
So he experienced the world exactly as we do.
He faced genuine temptation. He felt real, physical thirst. He experienced crushing emotional sorrow and betrayal, that human nature was exposed to the exact temporary evils that any other person would face in a fallen world. He was tried, tempted, and forsaken, just as the same nature in any other man might be.
He didn't use his divine nature as a cheat code to bypass human suffering.
Not at all. If he had bypassed the suffering, he wouldn't be a true daysman. He had to lay his hand on our actual reality.
Let's bring this massive theological framework right down to the immediate reality of the person listening to this right now. We've been discussing heavy, ancient theological distinctions: hypostatic union, individual subsistence, refuting 5th century heresies. If you are listening to this while driving to a job you hate, or sitting in a hospital waiting room dealing with a health crisis, or carrying a crushing burden of modern anxiety, you're probably asking, why does any of this matter to me today? The text introduces a concept from Isaiah chapter 8 and Peter's epistles, the idea of Christ being a sanctuary versus a rock of offense.
This is where Owen's highly technical theology becomes intensely, practically pastoral. He analyzes the dual response to the incarnation. Let's consider the person you just mentioned, someone in deep distress. Owen asks a very practical question. What is it that any person in distress looks for in a sanctuary?
When I think of a sanctuary, I think of a fortified room, a place where the noise stops and you are safe.
Owen breaks it down into 3 specific provisions. If you flee to a sanctuary, you are looking for 3 things. First, a supply of all your wants. Second, a deliverance from all your fears. And third, a defense against all your dangers.
Supply, deliverance, and defense. That covers pretty much every category of human anxiety.
It does. And Owen connects this directly to the 2 absolute prerequisites you need when you seek relief from anyone. Think about going to a friend for help. You need to know 2 things about that friend: their will to help you and their ability to help you.
That makes sense. If I go to a billionaire friend for financial help, he has the ability. But if he's stingy, he lacks the will, he won't help me.
Conversely, if you go to a deeply compassionate friend who is currently bankrupt, they possess the will to help you, but they lack the ability. In either scenario, you remain in distress. You need both will and ability to find a true sanctuary.
So how does the deep theology of the incarnation prove both of those things?
The will of Christ is proven beyond any shadow of a doubt by the sheer fact of his basis, his condescension. Think about what we established. The infinite creator, who needs nothing, voluntarily emptied himself. He stepped down from the prerogative of his eternal glory to take on our frail physical nature, exposing himself to sorrow, thirst, and death for the sole purpose of acting as a mediator for his enemies.
If he went to those unimaginable, mathematically impossible lengths to bridge the gap, the question of his willingness is settled forever.
Settled entirely. Will he not relieve us in our distress? Will he not do all that we stand in need of? The self-emptying is the ultimate proof of his will to save.
The logic there is deeply comforting. You don't have to wonder if he cares about the dust. He became the dust. He is not going to abandon you when you are terrified or anxious. But what about his ability? How does the theology secure that?
This is why rejecting those historical errors is so vital, because he preserved his divine essence entirely, because there was no transubstantiation, no mixing into green pain, no loss of deity. He retained his complete, unadulterated omnipotence. He lost nothing of his divine capacity. He could still do all that he could do as God from eternity past.
Let me make sure I'm grasping the weight of this. Owen is saying that in Christ Jesus you have a coalescency of infinite capacity with infinite condescension.
Let's unpack that phrase because it is the linchpin of the whole text. Coalescency of infinite capacity with infinite condescension. It means the bringing together of 2 massive realities.
Let me see if I have this right. Infinite capacity means he has the absolute raw muscle to stop whatever I'm terrified of. He commands the universe. And infinite condescension means he has the proven humility to actually care about my specific tiny terror.
That is the precise combination. That combination is what constitutes an indestructible sanctuary for a distressed soul. You have a mediator who has the might to defeat death itself and the willingness to listen to your smallest anxiety.
But the text says this exact same truth acts as a stumbling block to the world, a rock of offense. If it's such a perfect sanctuary, why does it offend people?
It offends human pride. Human reason rebels against the idea of an infinite creator subjecting himself to physical limitations. Unbelieving minds stumble at the word because they can't and won't see the glory in this condescension. They look at the cross and think it's
It
absurd.
looks weak to them.
They choose to utterly deny his divine person rather than allow that he would abase himself to such a degree. Human pride wants a God who stays comfortably far away in the heavens, acting as a distant clockmaker. Or alternatively, they want a human teacher who just gives good moral advice so they can earn their own way up the ladder, like the Socinian error.
We want to be the ones climbing the ladder. We don't want a God who climbs down into the dirt, because that implies we are utterly incapable of saving ourselves.
The idea of the Creator in a manger or hanging on a cross is deeply offensive to a society built on self-reliance. It forces you to admit your own total inability. So people reject the entire concept. They choose a refined philosophical heathenism over the mystery of the gospel.
Which brings us to Owen's intensely practical application. It's remarkably blunt, and it gets right to the heart of human selfishness. This is the ultimate cure for our tendency to hoard and cling to things.
This section raises a deeply uncomfortable question for you to reflect on. What are the things you clutch most tightly in this life?
The things we white-knuckle.
Hmm.
Owen lists them out. Our goods, our liberties, our relations, our lives. The things we pretend to have a sovereign right to. My house, my bank account, my reputation, my physical health.
And Owen provides a stark, almost jarring reality check. He calls all of these things perishing things. He points out that, whether we want to admit it or not, within a few days, death will give us an everlasting separation from every single one of them.
It's a morbid thought, but it's undeniably true. I can spend 80 years building an empire, but a microscopic virus or a failing heart valve will eventually separate me from my bank account, my house, and my social standing.
Owen says it will happen under the grip of a fever or an asthma attack or something similar. Your grip will fail. So how does the contemplation of Christ's extreme condescension act as the primary motivation for Christian self-denial?
I see where he's going with this.
Mhm.
If the creator of the universe voluntarily parted with the outward manifestation of his infinite glory, if he let go of the prerogative of his excellency and made himself of no reputation, how can I fiercely clutch my temporary, fading possessions?
Our unwillingness to part with these things reveals what Owen calls a sinful distemper. It's a sickness of the soul. We think our tiny pile of dust is more valuable than the eternal glory the Son of God voluntarily set aside.
It's embarrassing when you frame it that way.
Hmm.
He gave up infinite majesty, and I am losing my mind with anxiety over a slight dip in my retirement account, or a perceived insult to my reputation.
When we view by faith the glory of what Christ parted from, it acts as an effectual cure for that sinful sickness. You begin to contrast the eternal weight of his sacrifice with the fleeting nature of your worldly attachments. It puts everything into a staggering, mathematically undeniable perspective.
If he can let go of heaven to become a servant, I can let go of my pride to serve my neighbor. I can let go of my obsessive grip on my finances to be generous. The theology directly fuels the ethics.
The theology is the engine. Without the reality of the succatatifis, self-denial is just another form of moral self-improvement. But with it, self-denial becomes a response of worship.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, spanning theology, history, and deeply personal application. Let's recap the vast scope of the material we've pulled from Owen's text. We started by looking at the unbridgeable chasm of human apostasy, the legal and moral rebellion that necessitated a daysman, an arbitrator who could lay a hand on both parties.
We examined the shocking scale of the Creator's self-emptying. We then detailed the true mechanics of the incarnation, the assumption of our nature into his individual subsistence, the complete veiling of his glory so that he appeared as a normal man, and the preservation of his human nature through genuine suffering and temptation.
And we applied that massive theological framework to the distressed soul. We showed how his condescension proves his absolute will to save, and his retained deity proves his omnipotent ability to save. Together, will and ability combine to form an indestructible sanctuary. And finally, we face the stark call for self-denial, recognizing that if the Creator let go of his outward glory, we can let go of our perishing goods. The sheer awe of this subject matter really does stretch the mind to its breaking point.
It demands everything your intellect has, and then requires more, and that leads to a final provocative thought built upon Owen's text. Owen actually admits that looking directly at this mystery will quickly overwhelm our human reason. He says contemplating the incarnation will bring our understanding to a total loss.
A total loss of understanding. We usually view a loss of understanding as a failure.
We do, but consider this. What if the highest peak of human intellect is not comprehending every mechanical detail of the universe? What if the highest peak is actually reaching the absolute limit of your own understanding, only to find that the boundary line between logic and mystery is the exact place where true worship begins?
When faith can no longer act in comprehension, it issues in holy admiration. We started this deep dive talking about historical measurement. We talked about how we love to use logic and cause and effect to build a clean, visible understanding of reality. We want to measure the stones of the bridge. We want that comforting kitchen scale to tell us exactly how things work.
We want to comprehend the blueprints so we feel in control.
But the incarnation breaks the scale. It's murky waters for our logic. Yet what we've discovered today is that stepping into those unmeasurable waters is not a surrender of truth. It's stepping into a sanctuary. When you finally drop the need to mathematically solve the Creator's condescension, you are left with something far better than an equation. You are left with a daysman who has laid his hand on you. Keep thinking about that boundary line between logic and mystery this week. Thank you for listening to Reformed Thinking.